You are seeing live scenes of the presidents making their way up the stairs into the dome of the Artichon Conference Center. A joint press conference is going to be held in a little bit, but just before statements are made, there is going to be the signing of two agreements, one in the area of agriculture, more specifically fisheries, and the second in the area of health. Of course, this is coming at a time when the world is grappling with the global pandemic. Guyana is leading the way in vaccinations at this point in time. The president's now making their way into the dome. It's President Ali on the right of your screen and President Santokhi to the left of your screen. And of course, you see the ministers and the delegations on both sides showing respect by standing as both presidents make their way into the dome and take up their positions. These discussions, of course, happening for a while. The two chairs you see in front with the black dust between the podiums, that's where the agreements will be signed between the two countries, one in fisheries, the other one in the area of health, right here at the Artichon Conference Center. Cuts a great picture. You can see the similarities in the colors on our flags as well. Guyana having British as well as Dutch rule. I'll hand you over now to Permanent Secretary and the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Cooperation, Ms. Elizabeth Harper.
Thus, thank you.
Your Excellency Dr. Mohammed Irfan Ali, President of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, Your Excellency Chandrika Prasad Santokhi, President of the Republic of Suriname, distinguished ministers and members of the delegations of Guyana and Suriname, ladies and gentlemen of the media, good afternoon, Hud Midag. It is my pleasure this afternoon, before we enter into the press conference, to invite you to witness the signature of two agreements. I would first like to invite the Honorable Minister of Agriculture, the Honorable Zulfikar Mustafa of Guyana, and His Excellency Parmanan Sudian, Minister of Agriculture, Animal Husbandry, and Fisheries, to come forward to sign the protocol concerning the trade in fresh agricultural produce between the two countries. While this agreement is being signed, Ms. Savita Kum, Foreign Service Officer 2 of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, will read a brief explanation of the agreement.
Your Excellencies, Honorable Ministers, distinguished guests, all protocols observed. In an effort to meet their international obligations and follow international standards and the guidelines relating to the production, certification, processing, packaging, storing, and transporting of agricultural produce between the two countries, Guyana and Suriname have decided to conclude the protocol concerning the trade in fresh agricultural produce between the Republic of Suriname and the Cooperative Republic of Guyana. The terms and conditions set out in the protocol will relate only to commercial shipments of agricultural produce. The protocol focuses on the local and organic production of fresh agricultural produce by providing guidelines with respect to conditions under which they will be produced, stored in pack houses, and eventually packaged and transported to each country. Guyana and Suriname have also agreed to collaborate on addressing access for their agricultural produce in the North American and European market. Thank you.
The second agreement to be signed will be signed by the Honorable Dr. Frank Anthony, Minister of Health and Acting Minister of Foreign Affairs of Guyana, and His Excellency Albert Ramdin, Minister of Foreign Affairs, International Business and International Cooperation. They will be signing the agreement on the establishment of services in the field of healthcare between the Ministries of Health of both countries. Mr. Robin Motain, Foreign Service Officer 3 of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, will read a brief explanation of this agreement.
Thank you, Ambassador Harper. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I have the honor and privilege to inform you that the agreement on the establishment of services in the field of healthcare between the Ministry of Health of the Republic of Suriname and the Ministry of Health of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana sets out the terms and conditions under which both ministries will cooperate and deepen and strengthen strategic collaboration, provide effective capacity building for healthcare personnel, and specialty treatment for patients. In addition, the ministries will develop joint programs, especially in professional healthcare and public health services, disease control, diagnostic imaging, laboratory services, pharmaceutical services, and research. Finally, the parties agree in this era of the COVID-19 pandemic to coordinate their efforts with respect to cross-border diagnostics in COVID-19, contact tracing and quarantine, developing a risk communication strategy in COVID-19 awareness and COVID-19 vaccination awareness. Finally, the parties will also cooperate and share experiences in the COVID-19 vaccination campaign. I thank you.
Thank you, ministers. It is now my pleasure to hand you over to Mrs. Sue Finlay Williams, Press Secretary in the Office of the President, to moderate the Presidential Joint Press Conference. Thank you.
Your Excellencies, President of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, Dr. Mohammed Irfan Ali, and President of the Republic of Suriname, Chanchika Prasad Santokhi, members of the Cabinet, government officials, visiting ministers and dignitaries, members of the media, good afternoon and welcome to this joint press conference. Guyana and Suriname have forged a clear path of cooperation and mutually beneficial partnerships. This afternoon, I'd like to invite His Excellency, President Mohammed Irfan Ali, to deliver his opening remarks.
My dear friend, President Santokhi, members of the Surinamese and Guyanese delegations, ladies and gentlemen of the media, to our viewers who are streaming live. I truly welcome the opportunity to be able to have a fulsome discussion with President Santokhi. We share a collective vision for collaborative strategies, not only to bring our two countries closer, but strategies which would rebound to the individual benefits of both countries and peoples. The agenda that we have been discussing has centered around infrastructure, cooperation in specific areas of economic activity, as well as coordinated positions on the regional and international agenda, in particular climate change and COP26. I will highlight the outcome of these discussions. I know many persons are focused on our earlier commitment in relation to some specific projects. For example, the bridging of the Quarantine River. We both recognize that we now need to consolidate actions to choose from the shortlisted companies that have submitted expressions of interest for the construction of this bridge. We have decided that the approach would be a design, build, finance, own, and operate model. Our sides also have agreed that a working group would be established that includes the addition of the Ministers of Finance to determine the investment and concessions package that would accompany this expression of interest in securing the financing, building, operating, and ownership of the bridge. We have also discussed other areas of transportation, including air and maritime. There has been agreement on a number of issues that were raised by the private sector in removing hurdles and impediments to allow for smoother air travel and greater reliability of the ferry between Guyana and Suriname, the ferry service. Recognizing the importance of food security and agriculture, we had extensive discussions and we have agreed on a strategy that would see both countries supporting each other in entering the North American, European, and regional markets. In particular, examination of the possibilities in the poultry sector specifically will be conducted so as to harness our potential in satisfying the CARICOM requirement. In addition to this, I am pleased at the conclusion of discussions between the Ministers of Agriculture, and we have found a way forward in relation to the granting of license by Suriname to our fisher folk. And this would be in effect from January next year. And this is because that is the period that the licenses are normally granted. The area of oil and gas, recognizing that both countries will be key players in the oil and gas sector, we have decided that we're going to collaborate and develop a joint approach and strategy, not only in the development of the industry itself, but in supporting the development of our human resources to meet the industry requirement. Suriname was kind enough to offer, with immediate effect, opportunity for our young people, our Guyanese people, to be trained in Satsoli on the job. As you know, they're also advanced in the certification of key areas in the oil and gas sector, for example, welding. And we have identified this as an area in which they can help our human resource base to become certified to participate in the sector. More specifically, recognizing the potential of gas in Guyana and Suriname, we have decided that a working group would be established to come up with a joint gas strategy for both countries. But that strategy would be linked to the frontier development of both Guyana and Suriname. That includes infrastructure, industries, manufacturing, natural resources, the bauxite industry on both sides will be part of that strategic outlook in developing opportunities and exploiting the great potential on both sides of the Quarantine River. So, in essence, through the gas strategy, the joint gas strategy, we will be working on a joint development strategy for the frontier that will support the development of both economies. As we have said, we are not in competition, but we are on a journey of cooperating with each other to maximize the benefits for our people and in order to ensure that we do it successfully. So we will have synergies in terms of infrastructure and the use of infrastructure. In this regard, we're also examining and have decided that we will create a local content platform that will support both countries in terms of the opportunities that will come not only from this sector, but other areas in our economy. The private sector organizations of Guyana and Suriname were critically involved in these discussions, and they themselves will be making their own statement on these issues. The issue of security is one that is important for both countries, and we have agreed to collaborate in various areas, including training, technology, systems, modalities, and exchange of information. Tourism has been identified as a key area for both countries. So, we have also agreed that the two ministers and the entities will meet to determine a strategy that would jointly promote Guyana and Suriname, especially in the context of the Guyana Shield and the potential of including northern Brazil in that package. We also agreed that we're going to work closely in the natural resources sector. We're going to have a full examination of the opportunities in the natural resource sector with an aim combining our efforts to have the most efficient implementation and exploration of our natural resources potential on both sides of the Quarantine River. We recognize also that the ease of doing business and trade are areas that would have had its own bottlenecks. So we have agreed on the establishment of a trade facilitation committee that would include customs, the Revenue Authority, the Ministry of Finance, and the financial sector that can work on a quarterly basis to ensure that the barriers to trade and the barriers to doing business are removed in an expeditious manner. The issue of the environment is also a critical issue. We both recognize that in our development pathway, there has to be a balance with the environment. And of course, we have had good credentials in the area of the environment. We also recognize that we share similar conditions and opportunities, challenges too, as it relates to the environment and climate change. To this end, we have agreed that we are going to jointly approach the area of environment and climate change to come up with a common strategy for both Guyana and Suriname, especially in preparation for COP26 and also in exploring the possibility of merging our forest asset in the carbon credit market. Both Guyana and Suriname recognize that we have a valuable asset in Vice President Barry Jagdeo in this field of environment, and we've agreed that he would lead a delegation to Suriname before COP26 to look at the coordination of our strategies and also to work with our counterparts in Suriname in coming up with a common strategy in dealing with climate change and the environment. We also had meaningful discussions with the private sector of both Guyana and Suriname, and they are going to be integrally linked and be a part of the strategic dialogue platform. Before the end of this year, President Santokhi and I will be spearheading efforts to bring together the President of Brazil, bring together France, Guyana, Suriname, and French Guyana into a strategic summit to discuss issues of energy security and also to discuss the integration of our plans with their long-term development trusts. Very important on the agenda are the issues of healthcare and educational services, and we have also agreed that there will be great collaboration in these two areas. We both agree that the issue of vaccination and addressing the hesitancy in relation to vaccination is critical for us, and we're going to work on a shared strategy in promoting the full vaccination of our population. So, ladies and gentlemen, key to all of this is our people-to-people partnership, as President Santokhi put it. That is bringing our people together in a space and in an environment that they can share and appreciate each other. So we have also committed to re-energizing the Inter-Guyana Games, bringing back the Inter-Guyana Games, the Inter-Guyana Cultural Forum platform that was started so we can have sports, culture, education, and technological exchanges as part of forging greater unity, trust, collaboration, and understanding of our peoples. So with this, ladies and gentlemen of the media, that is my opening statement. Thank you very much.
Thank you, President Ali. It's now time for us to hear from our visiting head of state, President His Excellency, President Santokhi.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, my friend Konali, distinguished ministers, distinguished members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. It is my utmost pleasure to stand here today with the ability to address both nations with good news. News carrying forth prosperity. News showing the strength of neighborly cooperation. News that shows the importance of focusing on the matters that bind us, instead of focusing on issues where our individual focus may consist of differences. These 4 days where we literally and figuratively focus on building a bridge between our two nations. We have paved the way for uplifting this generation, and it pleases me to say we did so in a sustainable manner, ensuring the well-being of future generations. Our agenda was lengthy one, and this was a presidential meeting led by two presidents, and where we had an agenda which were covering of all areas of cooperation, and there was a progress evaluation, and based on that, this meeting, these 4 days, had a special emphasis on taking decision. 1 year of close collaboration in several areas, and that was the time now to take strategic decision, where my colleague elaborated already on it. Let me assure you that with this visit, we invested the taxpayers' money wisely, if that should be an issue. We come out with these discussions with the intentions of becoming a stronger unity, assuring our mutual growth, for example, in the field of renewable and non-renewable energy. In our ever-changing global economy, strengthening our global position is crucial for both nations. On the aspects of health, the two nations found themselves agreeing on cooperation regarding health, and the agreement was signed. And once again, I reiterate what was stated by my colleague and friend that as regard the COVID pandemic, that we should urge our both nation, our both people to take the vaccine and follow the vaccination strategy of both nations. And that's the only way to keep our nation, to keep our community safe. On the matter of oil and gas, my colleague has elaborated already, but let me once again reiterate that within a short period of time, a design proposal will be presented for a clear strategy how to exploit the gas of the two nations for the industrial development in the west side of Suriname and the east side of Guyana, and also to develop the bauxite industry and also to export that gas to Brazil. Let me give you some more detail on the development of the Quarantine River and what was decided during this meeting. Within 1 week, the Joint Evaluation Commission will evaluate if the selected 8 companies meet the new requirements, as said by my colleague, to study, design, build, finance, and operate for the building of the Quarantine Bridge. The technical advice from the maritime authorities of both countries will be included in the decision to determine where and how the Quarantine Bridge will be built. And the advice, in this advice, will include the State Oil Staatsoli study on the development of West Suriname, on the decision regarding the construction of the Quarantine Bridge. This decision must be made within 4 weeks. There were discussions also and on the area of infrastructure and transport, because the public transport and the private transport is crucial for the improvement of the cooperation, but also the development of tourism on both sides. And we had agreed on a lot of issues regarding the public and private transportation, and the ministers can elaborate further on that. As regards the Kanawaima ferry, the Kanawaima ferry service and the Kanawaima Management Company of Suriname has been complete and communicated to the Guyana since early August 2021. Kanawaima has been released after inspection by the Surinamese Dry Dock Shipping Company, and the last administrative obligations are taken care of before the Kanawaima is fully put into service, and that will be the coming days. As regards the cooperation with the private sector, I just can add that a new mechanism has been established, and that is the Suriname-Guyana Joint Business Council. And in this regard, I can mention that this morning we had the opening of a Surinamese branch company in Guyana, Optic Ninon, and that's the expression of how business should be done between the two countries. As said by my colleague, the people-to-people communication, interaction is very important. All the initiatives which are taken by the government on both sides and jointly, and all the initiatives that are taken by the private sector jointly, will be carried out by people. And there we have to invest for a better communication with the people of both nations. And we'll have a lot of programs, cultural programs, exchange programs, sport programs, programs between high schools and universities. Those will be included to have a better communication, a better understanding between the two people, the two communities. And once again, I'll reiterate the importance of the vaccine strategy. And both leaders have expressed this. And once again, we are calling on both sides to follow the strategy of the government and let it follow the vaccine program. That was on my side the information I wanted to share with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, President Santokhi. President Ali and President Santokhi will now respond to questions from members of the media. I would like to ask that you use the opportunity to engage the two heads of state on matters relating to their statements and the outcomes of bilateral talks thus far. And please remember to introduce yourself and the agency you represent. I see we have our first question. Please utilize also the microphones in front of you. Thank you. Go ahead, sir.
Good afternoon. My name is Kimal King from Ghana's Department of Public Information. Your Excellencies, I know that one of the things you intend to do is to work to harmonize better the economic spaces of Guyana and Suriname. Apart from the building of a bridge, what other interventions, if any, can the public see being made by your government to unify the economic spaces for the benefit of cross-border business expansion?
That's it. Thank you. Sirs, would you like me to invite another question? Okay, thank you, sir. I'll take another question now. Who would like to? Go ahead, sir.
Good afternoon, Your Excellencies. I have two questions, one for the President of Suriname and the next for the President of Guyana.
Please identify yourself.
President Santokhi, you mentioned that my name is Bob James from HGP Nightly News. President you mentioned that within the next 4 weeks, there is an evaluation committee that's going to be set up as far as identifying the location for the imprinted bridge that is going to be built between Suriname and Guyana. Now, as far as the project life cycle is concerned, we have a plan build phase and a deploy operate phase. After that committee meets, could you give us a high level of when the plan build phase will commence and deploy operate? And what will be the project life cycle for the bridge? My next question is for President Ali. Mr. President, you spoke of the gas initiative, the joint gas initiative between the two countries. And the reason for that is for the development of the natural resources for the countries. Now, you mentioned bauxite. In your deliberations, did the question ever come up about the value added aspect of bauxite? And is that going to become a reality? Thank you very much.
Thank you. I will allow one more question, sir. Please.
Good afternoon, President Santokhi, President Ali. I'm Samuel Blankendal from ABC TV Radio from Suriname. I'd like to mention the issue about the border. In about 4 weeks, there will be a technical advice. Despite the advice for one of these two countries, will this have any influence on all the agreements and plans that Suriname and Guyana have? This question is for both of the presidents. President Santokhi, will the people of Suriname will see any benefits on the agreements so that you and your ministers have signed? Because right now we have a financial crisis in Suriname. We had some protests. Will we see any benefits on all the conversations you had with your colleague? And President Ali, about there is in Texas the oil and gas conference. Why did not you, the Prime Minister and some of the people from the private sector chose to go to Houston right now? Because right now we have a lot of ministers and people from Suriname here. Was it not better to go together to there or to visit another conference at one time? Because you have both the same plans to do. Thank you.
Thank you for your questions. Sirs?
Thank you very much. If I may commence with the last question first. When you're in government, you have many competing demands. When you're in government, you don't deal with a single task in a single day. And don't for a moment believe that for us this is the only task we're dealing with strategically. Although we have this visit, there are still tasks that you have to deal with continuously. This strategic dialogue has always been at the level of the President and the Cabinet. So it's just a matter of coincidence that the Houston conference was at the same time with this visit. That doesn't diminish from anything we are doing here. Our Prime Minister is here. He engaged with the President. We have all our ministers here, just like you have your ministers here. There's no gap there. So I think this is an invented nuance. There is nothing to this. Our objective is to move forward, to deliberate on key issues and to make key decisions. And as you have seen, that is exactly what we're doing. Moving forward, making key decisions in the interests of the people of both countries. The Vice President, who is leading a delegation to Houston, will be in Suriname to work with his counterparts on issues of the environment. So every single piece of government is integrated into these discussions. So let me assure you that the greatest level of seriousness, the greatest level of attention, and the greatest level of respect has been paid to this visit and to the outcome of this visit. For us, it is never about personality. And it can never be about personality. It has to be about the interests of the people. And that is the purpose of the strategic dialogue. How do we collaborate and integrate our plans to derive the best possible outcome for the people of both countries? And that is the focus. The question on the gas initiative on bauxite, very, very good question. And that is exactly what the working group will be doing in developing the strategic direction because we recognize, and that is why I said natural resources, we recognize that with gas comes the opportunity for cheap energy, which brings the opportunity of upstream and downstream benefit, not only for bauxite, but for many other things. And that is why President Santokhi mentioned a group looking at the bridge itself. Because when we look at the strategic development that will take place on both sides, we have to ensure that we get it right in terms of the development that will take place and the location of the bridge. So yes, the whole strategy is to link the gas, depending on the quantum you're looking at, with value added for bauxite, value added for other industries, agro-processing, agrochemical, the potential of fertilizer, and also the creation and the building of the capacity. That is why we have to do this together, to become an energy supplier for northern Brazil, in which discussions are already ongoing. President Santokhi has already opened up discussion on that side. I have already opened up discussions. That is why it is very critical that we bring the other players around the table in developing the long-term strategy with this. So the answer in short, yes, the value-added aspect has been taken into consideration. In terms of the project life cycle of the bridge, I'm not sure if you're asking us the life cycle of the construction phase or the life cycle of the bridge itself. That will come out of the study in the design, build, finance, build, operate, own. So that is where we're going now. There has been expressions of interest already to do this, but now the technical people, this will be in the technical people's hands to do the evaluation and make the necessary recommendations. Then Kemal, you asked on the harmonization of our economic space. It is not only the bridge. We're talking about a joint strategy for oil and gas, a strategy for food security and agricultural development to meet, Suriname gives us the advantage of getting into the European market. Guyana gives Suriname the advantage of getting into the North American market. We have the CARICOM market. So we are working on how we build the synergies between Guyana and Suriname in terms of the opportunity in agriculture and food security, environmental services, health services. We talk about the ease of doing business, removing the barriers to doing business. I spoke about the environmental, and then the people-to-people cooperation. So there are many areas that, many initiatives that would lead to immediate medium-term benefit and significant long-term benefits. Thank you.
Thank you, my colleague, my friends. Let me add some additional information on those answers which just were provided by my colleague. Firstly, the question on economic spaces. That was the purpose for this meeting, that we have brought with us the private sector. And that's the first time that in a presidential delegation, the private sector was included because of the recognition what we have as two leaders, that the private sector should play a very important role, a pivotal role in the development of the economy of both nations. By having joint investment, by establishing joint business, that's the direction where we're moving on. That if you start with a business in Suriname, you're dealing with a market of more than 1.5 million people. on both sides. If we're talking about local content, it's not about local content for Guyana or local content for Suriname. No, it is a joint local content. And with this approach, the business opportunity has been improved, broadened, and it's now up to the private sector to have a proactive role, to join us as government in also implementing the initiatives and also implementing the several the projects. Yes, we have discussed also issues on the financial sector. Here is the challenge now for the banking sector in Suriname and banking sector in Guyana to have also joint approach to see how they can facilitate the business community in easing of doing business through financial services. The IT was involved. The IT is also in charge of improving the business with both community as well as on governmental level as the private sector level. So yes, there's a lot of opportunities on the economic space. The question on the bridge that had been addressed properly by my colleague, but once again, we are in support of a integral approach of the development on the west side of Suriname and the east side of Guyana. And the developments are in the area of oil and gas exploitation, but more the gas side to use it as cheap energy for the development of the industry on both sides, but also to start with your bauxite exploration and exploitation in the southwest area and close cooperation with Guyana, and the export of gas energy to Brazil. So from that perspective, you have to look again to that bridge and more technically if everything is fitting in this integral strategy. That is why we have asked the Joint Committee to have a close examination and come within 4 weeks with the final proposal, and that will come to our table as head of state to take decision. Then we had the question of Mr. Blankendal, our only Sudanese journalist, and I know you're having always live program while you're addressing the question. So, colleague, with your permission, let me address this question also in Dutch, so that people in Suriname can follow it. Ja, geachte kijkers en luisteraars, er zijn een paar vragen gesteld die bijzonder belangrijk zijn. Eén is die vraag met betrekking tot die brug. Ja, we hadden die plaats al vastgesteld. De ministers van Openbare Werken en Public Works die zijn geweest. En op basis van technische adviezen uitgebracht door deskundigen is er een plaats daarvoor gekozen. Dat was spoor nummer 1. En dit is verder uitgewerkt en voorbereid. 8 bedrijven hebben zich al aangemeld op basis van die expression of interest. Maar simultaan aan dit project is ook gegaan, namelijk het project gedaan door een high-level study group in Suriname, bestaande uit Surinaamse deskundigen, hoe het westen van Suriname, oosten van Guyana, sterk ontwikkeld kan worden op basis van een integraal plan van gasexploitatie, met gas, energie opwekken, industrie ontwikkelen aan beide kanten, de brug die daar komt, maar tegelijkertijd in het westen de beschikbaarheid van bauxiet weer gaan ontwikkelen, zodat we kunnen starten met een moderne aluinaarde fabriek daar, met import van bauxiet uit Guyana en export van gas naar ook Brazilië. Tegen die achtergrond en het intensief verkeer wat zal kunnen ontstaan op de quarantainerivier moet je nu technisch gaan overwegen, namelijk de hoogte van de brug en de plaats van de brug, of alles goed zit, zodat we geen fouten maken. En daarom hebben we de evaluatiecommissie nog gevraagd. 4 weken, ga nog een keertje kijken. Laat er simulaties plaatsvinden. Breng al die personen, bedrijven, instanties die meegedaan hebben aan die expression of interest, breng ze ook. En laten we gezamenlijk er naar kijken, zodat we na 4 weken een eindvoorstel kunnen krijgen, zodat wij 2 leiders hierover samen met onze deskundige ministers een besluit hieromtrent kunnen nemen. The agreements and which were signed and the benefits of these agreements towards our community, particularly the Surinamese community, that was Mr. Blankadal asking. Yes, there will be a lot of benefits for the community on the Surinamese side. The agriculture agreement will enable Surinamese farmers and also all the peoples involved in the agriculture to have easy business with Guyana. There will be also cooperation in the studying and examining several types of products. For example, during our visit here, there was a serious problem in Suriname, which was expressed by export group of rice to the European market. And those business group of people involved in the rice export, they expressed their concern that the rice seed was not meeting the international quality standards. And they were lacking other seeds in Suriname. And here we were, 2 leaders, hearing that problem and bringing solutions so that this business group of people can go back to Suriname now with rice seeds of better quality from Guyana to Suriname, so that with that seed we can have an expansion of our seed for all the other rice farmers. So this is an example of what kind of arrangements we can make with. But now we have an agreement for a structural cooperation in the area of agriculture and more. The same thing with the health, particularly giving the positioning of the 2 countries as neighboring countries. A health threat is not ending at a border. Health is a cross-border issue. And that's why we need to have close cooperation on governmental level, on ministerial level, on all the levels which are impacted by health threat. And we need to have a proactive approach. We need to have a strong prevention to mitigate the threat coming from the health situation. And on the other side, we have now the challenge of COVID, that we need to have close cooperation with 2 nations as 2 bordering countries. Dus nogmaals, deze 2 overeenkomsten die gaan in het voordeel zijn van zeker onze samenleving. Heel wat boeren kunnen hun voordelen halen uit deze overeenkomst. De samenwerking tussen ADRON en de Rice Board van Guyana, dat wordt nu geformaliseerd. Maar aan de andere kant gaan we elkaar ondersteunen bij het exporteren van landbouwgewassen naar de rest van de wereld. Als wij in Suriname producten hebben en die producten kunnen we niet rechtstreeks sturen naar de Verenigde Staten van Amerika, dan zijn er hier in Guyana heel wat landbouwbedrijven en exporteurs die toegang hebben en een grote markt hebben, met name hun diaspora daar in New York en andere gebieden. Nou, dan kunnen onze businessmensen gebruik maken van die samenwerking en onze producten ook daar krijgen op de markt in Amerika. Aan de andere kant hebben wij sterke links met Europa, met name onze exportlijnen naar Frankrijk en Nederland. En dat heeft Guyana niet. Daar is een opportunity om samen te werken, business to business, producten vanuit Guyana naar Suriname die richting Europa kunnen. Dat zijn die pragmatische samenwerkingen die we nu ook geformaliseerd hebben met de overeenkomsten. En de laatste opmerking over de status en ook misschien de afwezigheid van leden bij dit gesprek. Dit is een bijeenkomst wat geïnitieerd is door ons en vindt plaats onder de paraplu van de Strategic Dialogue and Cooperation Platform, geleid door 2 presidenten. En dat is deze bijeenkomst. En alle autoriteiten die nodig zijn in de werkgroepen, in de taskforce, die zijn hier aanwezig van beide kanten. En dat is belangrijk voor ons. En daarom zijn we in staat geweest zulke verregaande en belangrijke beslissingen te nemen. Omdat dit platform een sterk platform is, geleid door 2 presidenten. Commitment van 2 presidenten, een politieke visie van 2 presidenten, die wij nu exerceren en tot uiting laten komen door verregaande samenwerking, maar ook om te zorgen namelijk dat de verschillende werkgroepen hun materie goed uitwerken en weer naar ons brengen en waarover wij daar goedkeuring uitspreken. Dat is gebeurd in deze 4 dagen, vandaag de 3e dag. En dat is de sfeer van deze bijeenkomst geweest. Beslissingen nemen, besluiten nemen na een jaar van discussie, na een jaar van uitwerkingen, na een jaar van familiarisatie, na een jaar van goed op elkaar afgestemd zijn van beleid en structuren, dat wij nu zijn gekomen om deze zwaarwichtige beslissing te nemen in het belang van land en volk van beide landen.
Thank you, President Santokhi, and thank you, President Ali. I see there's an indication from across the room. Please go ahead and present your question, and after which I will allow one other question. 2.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. 3 related questions. Sir, how does this joint gas energy project fit in with the Arco Norte project that includes Brazil, Guyana, Suriname, French Guyana? And what kind of debt could the countries be incurring in being part of this project, if any? And can you say conservatively at this time about how much gas you think the basin has that will allow this strategy to take off in the way that you envisage? And thirdly, could you also say what exactly are some of the environmental implications for this project? That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. I'll take the next question now, please.
Good afternoon, Your Excellencies. Lakram from the Guyana Times. You spoke about the licensing of fishermen to operate in the Quarantine River. As recent as June, we've had complaints of fishermen operating there, being harassed, what they call undue harassment by the Surinamese authorities. This is in addition with residents of the indigenous communities of Oriela and Siparuta. So what guarantee can you both give the fishermen and the indigenous residents that steps would be taken to address this harassment, and would we ever be seeing a holistic agreement in the future as it relates to access on the Quarantine River? Thank you.
Thank you, and I'll allow our final question now.
Good afternoon, Excellencies. Marcel Thomas from the Starbrook News. I have 2 questions. On the bridge project, it was said that there would be a commercial zone on Long Island where the bridge meets in the Quarantine River. I want to know if that commercial zone is still being explored, and if it is, would it be done simultaneously with the building of the bridge? And on that same project, who owns it? My second question is on the agriculture agreement. It's just to get some clarity. Mr. President, when you said it's only commercial, I want to know, would it have, that's our president, President Ali, would it have trickle-down effects? Or what can local poultry farmers here expect? Because there's already a lot of poultry smuggling from Suriname. I want to know, how does it pan out for our local poultry producers? Thank you.
Thank you. Sirs, if you don't mind, I'd like to invite one question, an additional question from this side of the room.
Good afternoon, Your Excellencies. Kiana Wilberg, Kaiser News. I'm interested in hearing your perspectives on the latest report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Both countries are members of that panel, and a report was released where the UN Secretary General basically said that it sounds a death knell for the fossil fuel industry, as well as a code red for humanity. Could you say if both parties are working with that report in mind, the message of that report in mind, for your respective fossil fuel industries? And as a follow-up to that, I know that there's a lot of talk about developing oil and gas, but is there any message on the agenda from both sides regarding a strategy to protect the environment? Is it possible that we can see a joint oil spill response from both countries? Thank you.
Thank you. Sirs, you now have the floor.
Thank you very much, Dennis. The Akanarta plan is indeed a master plan that was developed some time ago. And it is in this context that this joint approach is being developed. So yes, the joint energy plan is definitely linked, and that is why we are working towards that bigger summit with Brazil, France, French Guiana, and Guyana. I don't want to go into the details of this because very soon we will have the technical team meeting, and we have agreed that they will be briefing for the private sector and the media when we come up with that overarching strategy from the joint team. But those who are familiar with the plan would know of the potential there in creating a new hub of manufacturing, industrial activity, but more importantly, on the energy side. And you're right, Dennis, a lot of this has to do with the quantum of gas. And that is why we said that this strategic analysis and a joint approach is critical to this, to determine these technical attributes. There are some stats that was presented to us for internal consumption. From Satsoli, for example, did a very good presentation. But as I said, let the technical team work, and then that presentation will be made in relation to the specific question on quantum. And that will determine the size of initiative. And it is linked also to the question that my brother asked in terms of the value added and what is the best possible return on the gas and where the greatest possibility lies for a sustainable return and use. On the environmental implication, this is an important aspect of the assessment, and definitely it will be part of that joint strategic working group that will come up with the framework and come up also with a strategy on both frontier development, environmental parameters, environmental challenges, and the issue of the environment itself will be and has to be addressed in a holistic way. Because as you know, we are pursuing a low carbon development strategy. President Santokhi is also working on a strategy that ensures a green economy. So issues of the environment are important to both countries, and that will definitely be part of the strategy. In terms of the bridge and who owns the bridge, who will own the bridge, that is why we're going out for a design, build, own, operate, and finance. That's the model. So the model will go out there for, and there are already interest that has been sent to both countries on building, designing, financing, building, operating, and ownership of the bridge. The terms of that and then the type of incentives, fiscal incentives that both sides would have to give and to offer as the package for investment, that will be determined by the group that I said in my opening statement will be meeting. In terms of the development of Long Island, that too is a determination that the group will make and whether it comes in the package and, of the bridge. And as President Santokhi said, we also have to look at the holistic development around the bridge also. What will be happening around the bridge, given our joint strategic approach in terms of the natural resources and the gas strategy. The poultry producers, we're going a step further. You know, right now in Guyana, we are working towards ensuring all the soya and corn requirement for the poultry industry, for the feed, for the livestock industry, is produced locally by 2023. So I had a conversation with the sector itself, representatives from the sector. And what we want to do is to bring the sector together from both Guyana and Suriname. Poultry, and it's interesting, Marcel, that you raise poultry, because poultry is actually the example we use as to how we can bring the industry from both sides together with the aim at not only the two markets, but the aim is to get coverage for the CARICOM market and to look at the backward and forward integration. So the poultry producers are integrally and will be integrally involved in the development of this sector and dealing with the challenges of the development of this sector. So that is in relation to the poultry industry. Lakram, look, when we dealt with this fishing industry and the license in the initial stage, there were some allegations, and we asked the fishermen to give us the information in relation to those allegations in terms of the licensing. So we had a back and forward with that, that impeded the finalization of this issue, but we have come to a solution. We have come to a solution at this meeting, and once the information set is handed over to the Ministry of Agriculture, who would facilitate the process with the Ministry of Agriculture in Suriname, then in a new licensing phase, which commences in January, the license will be issued in relation to the quota that was already determined. In terms of the issues on the Quarantine River with the indigenous community and our fisher folk, we raised this from the time it occurred with the Minister of Foreign Affairs. He intervened. I think we had two incidents were reported to us. Two incidents were reported to us. Both there was intervention, and we also had discussion on how we can avoid a situation like those in the future. We are in a process of identifying officials from both sides who can work in collaboration with each other to avoid this, avoid these unfortunate incidents in the future. So, fossil fuel, the issue of the ICP and moving to fossil fuel. You and I know that there is a gap as to when when the targets can be realized. We also know that, I'm looking for Kiana. I don't know where's, oh yeah, sorry. We also know that there are many targets that were set for climate change and on the climate agenda. There was also money that the developed world set aside for climate change that we're still waiting for. We have not received that as yet, but there's a new pledge for new money. So there the issues of climate change that are global, our credentials on the environment outmatch anyone on the environment, and I'm speaking here for Guyana. Uh, we can say that in a net way, we are a positive story on the environment side. Now, what do? We have this natural resource that is critical for the transformation of our people, that is critical to make other sectors competitive. And you're right, there is not there's a, more and more, there's a time frame that we have to exploit this natural resource in bringing benefit to the other sectors, in making the other sectors competitive, in getting the necessary revenues to create the fiscal space so our food program can develop in a competitive way to meet regional and global demand, so our tourism product can develop. And more importantly, so the provision of services, medical, educational services, the creation of opportunities and the opening up of new opportunities. We don't have to hide behind we don't have to hide from any discussion on the environment, because our credentials on the environment is unquestionable. So we are committed to, and we've always been committed to, international best practices and international targets on climate change. But we are also aware of the changing nature of these targets. We are also aware of the lack of commitment to resources that we were long supposed to receive in relation to climate change. And we have new commitments now being made. So developing countries in the developed world, we have to be pragmatic about this situation. We have to understand that we have a development strategy. We also have a commitment to make the lives of our people better, to bring prosperity to our people. And whilst we continue to commit to the protection of the environment and securing the environment, we have been at the receiving end of climate change, the inaction of climate change and the consequences. But there is no vulnerability fund. We don't contribute to the climate disaster now, but we have floods as a result of climate change. The Caribbean have changing patterns. CARICOM itself, the region, suffers the greatest from climate-related incidents. All the reports point to this. What mechanism is there to protect the region, to safeguard the region, to help the region to mitigate against this, to help the region to recover from this? Look at what is happening with Haiti. Look at the more frequent hurricanes, the floods. Where is the mechanism to help these countries in the region, to help us when we face climate disaster? So we understand our responsibility, but we understand also we have to find a balance in ensuring we create prosperity for our people. And prosperity for our people is prosperity for the region as a whole. So that would be my short response, Diana. Thank you very much. The joint?
Joint
Oh, yeah.
collaboration on the oil spill response.
The joint?
Joint
Oh, yes.
collaboration.
Okay, so that is why we are setting up that working group that Vice President would lead so that we can have a joint analysis of threats, challenges, and opportunity, and we can come up with a common strategy. Because as you know, we're also part of the same forest basin too. So can you imagine if we merge our potential, the type of impact and benefit we can bring to the table?
Thank you, Mr. President. President Santokhi.
Yes, thank you. I'm fully in support of the information and also the position provided by my colleague Ali on all those topics. Only one issue that should maybe have some more additional information. That was the question on the bridge, the status, and also how it will operate. We are now engaged with several companies, parties who have expressed their interest. So that is the modality what we want. But finally, we will see the proposals coming from all these companies if they are in agreement on the strategy what we want. And then we'll see what their proposals will be, and it come to our table to take proper decision. And sure, we'll look to the juridical side of the proposals which should come on owning the bridge and also the positioning of the bridge on the Quarantine River, which should be very clear as regards the juridical status on that. But we're looking forward what proposals we are getting on the basis of what kind of juridical construction. Those will be advice to us, and we'll be in charge and taking proper decision on that, and if that will be agreeable for us. This morning we had a meeting with the private sector, and my colleague invited the private sector from Guyana and Suriname. Why you private sector is not collecting the money together to build the bridge? So Surinamese and Guyanese business people can build the bridge over there, but that was an invitation. But that is the expression of how we're looking at it, that we want that bridge as quick as possible, and that bridge should have not only a function where people can cross the border, but that bridge will be very pivotal for the entire economic development, the industrial development for both sides of the country. And that bridge should bring very strategic development also towards the southern part of our country, like Brazil. So once again, that I want to add this information. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellencies. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the end of our program for today. Thank you. You will receive the communique at the end of the press conference. Thank you, Mr. President.
And end the official joint press conference, the signing of two agreements with the presidents of Guyana and Suriname, one in the area of agriculture and the other one in the area of health. So let me give you a recap. The signatories, the MOUs that were signed today. The first in agriculture, trade in fresh produce between the two countries. It governs the processing, packaging of storage and transport of fresh produce only for commercial shipments. And in healthcare, there is going to be the deepening of capacity building and treatment of persons, a program to be developed. Agreement will address disease protocols, research and lab services, cross-border strategies for COVID-19 awareness and vaccination, and of course the sharing of experiences in vaccinations. Those were the two agreements that were signed here at the Arthur Chung Conference Center, coming out of just about 2 to 3 days of discussions, bilaterals between President Ali and Santokhi and their technical teams. Also, as you see, they're making their exit from the dome. The press conference started just after 2 o'clock today, just around 2:30 today, where the two signings happened, followed by the joint press conference and statements being made by the president. The presidents, surely you'll see coming down the stairs there now, are going to make their exit from the Arthur Chung Conference Center. Just over my left shoulder, they will appear in a few moments. They're making their way from the second floor of the Arthur Chung Conference Center. That's the dome. It was spacious, given COVID-19 protocols that had to be observed. The signings happening, and then of course the statements coming. So a recap of what President Ali, as you see them making their way down the final flight of stairs, and they will either go directly outside or they will retreat to the President's Lounge. From what I see here, I'm taking a little bit of a vantage point, turning a bit to my left. The presidents will be exiting the Arthur Chung Conference Center, having been here on an official 4-day visit. President Santokhi and his team departs Guyana. Tomorrow you see him there smiling and chatting with his Chief of Protocol, Colonel Abraham. President Santokhi being also led out by their protocol team and being followed by the various ministers of government. Now that you see this become so common, the elbow bump rather than a handshake because of the COVID pandemic. This is President Santokhi in his green being ushered into his waiting vehicle just at the end of the red carpet. Standing there is the President, Dr. Irfan Ali, waiting to officially see him off from the Arthur Chung Conference Center, where all of the discussions, the majority of the bilateral discussions and the plenary session, the working sessions happened with the various ministers and of course technical team. There you see Dr. Ali in his blue suit with his red tie as President Santokhi departs the Arthur Chung Conference Center. From my vantage point, just inside the foyer of the Arthur Chung Conference Center, and the president now departs. He gives a final look back in a chat with his protocol officer, Colonel Earl Edgell. He will make his way out of, and then that pretty much brings to an end the official proceedings and everything from the ceremonies here at the Arthur Chung Conference Center. Chatting, of course, there with Tourism Minister, part of the discussion happening, Tourism Minister Onej Waldron, part of the discussions happening would involve travel between both countries, tourism being a big player in the discussion happening there. So let's give you a bit of a rundown of what came out of the joint press conference. Of course, after the signings of the MOUs for agriculture and health, President Ali gave his opening remarks in which he discussed or he gave us an idea of what came out of that. Both countries share a collaborative vision for the development. On that discussion, climate change, COP26, bridging of the Quarantine River, decided, and this is where a timeline has been set for within the next week to sit down and look at the submissions from both countries. Interests have been submitted from both countries, and the model they're going to use is design, build, finance, operate, and ownership of the Quarantine River Bridge that is to be developed. We see the president's car just about to roll off from here at the Arthur Chung Conference Center, tying up 2 days worth of discussions happening here. Today, of course, as we told you earlier, private sector development day, the private sector having a big part to play in these discussions, and of course coming out of that, a new joint private sector commission developed, a working group rather developed to look at improvements towards trade and development coming up. So a working group has already been discussed. This is from President Ali's statement earlier. A working group has been established to include the finance ministers. This would be with regards to the Quarantine River Bridge, where they have decided on a model to design, build, finance, operate, and own the bridge. Within the next week, that will be done, and within 4 weeks, the joint committee is hoping to make that discussion or have that decision so we know where we go in a month's time from now. On agriculture, they're talking about accessing the North American, regional, and European markets, more along the way of food security. The president saying they're pleased with the way discussions happen. Licenses are being granted for fisher folk from January 2020, that is to fish in Surinamese waters and vice versa. Of course, that is one of the discussions. Do I stay within my maritime borders? And we referred to that earlier. Do I stay within my maritime borders? Now, as of 2022, January 2022, Guyanese fisher folk will be licensed to operate in Surinamese waters and vice versa. That, of course, comes into play with when licenses are actually given around that period of time. Oil and gas. Both countries will collaborate to develop a joint approach in strategy, not only development of industry, but development of human capacity. And with immediate effect, there will be on-the-job training for locals who go across to Suriname to work within that state company, Soli, that's their oil company over there, government. And they're also going to become certified as well. That's locals being certified as well. So an immediate coming out of their on-the-job training for our locals in the oil and gas sector. Now, a working group is to be established for a joint gas strategy for both countries. And this will also include natural resources, the bauxite industry, infrastructure, exploring potentials on both sides. And a joint development strategy, of course, is going to come out of this. President Ali making it clear we are not in competition, but we're collaborating with each other. And we will have synergies in the use of agriculture. You see Minister Robeson Ben standing there, Foreign Secretary Robert Besod also just leaving. Discussion happening, of course, on security as well. What they're looking to do is also to create a local content platform that will support both countries, and the private sector is involved in this, and we're still talking oil and gas and energy here. In security, as I just mentioned, Minister Robeson Ben leaving. They have agreed to collaboration in training, tech, use of technology, system modalities, and of course the exchange of information. With everything happening now, Guyana is no longer considered to be living in a bubble by itself or operating in a silo. We're now part of a global community. And now that we're also in the energy, the oil and gas energy producing bracket, it means Guyana is no longer closed off, and we will be having quite a bit of investment coming. In the area of tourism, it's key for both countries. This is, of course, the words of President Dr. Irfan Ali. Two ministers and entities will meet to determine a strategy that will benefit both, especially in the Ghana Shield context. We spoke about natural resource sector. A reviews to be done to have the most efficient implementation and exploration of natural resources. That's where a lot of discussion will also come into play. And then, of course, if you're having everyone in your country, there was a discussion of doing ease of business and trade. Trade and facilitation committee is to be developed, which will include the customs, the GRA, and they'll be working together to see how best we can make business investment in and then both countries easier for everyone to go through. And the ease of business is actually a ranking that is done within the world where countries come together to show their strategies and to see how difficult, how easy it is to actually register a business, to get services done. And that's where the whole discussion about the single window for discussion, and the single window to register your business and get information on what's happening in Guyana comes into play. Guyana is slowly moving up that ease of business window. We spoke about the environment. Joint approach is going to be created in the area of environment and climate change strategy for both countries ahead of COP26. And of course, they're merging our forests. A discussion has begun on merging the forests to benefit from carbon credit. Of course, you know, Ghana is a big player in the greening, and we have been earning revenues from that. Now, Suriname and Ghana are looking at twinning. And of course, leading that would be Vice President Barjagli. And of course, during his presidency, he pushed a serious agenda on green development and sustainability of our countries. Now let's talk about the private sector. And they said fruitful discussions happened there before the end of the year. Both presidents will try, this is President Ali and President Santokhi, will try to spearhead efforts to bring the presidents of France, Brazil, French Guiana together to discuss energy security integration of plans for long-term development agenda. Of course, Ghana and Suriname looking to advance again. This is the third time they're having discussions within the past year on advancing that. Health and education, they're going to collaborate. Both have agreed to that vaccinations are important as they look to restart the economy, and of course the agreement that was signed earlier in health speaks to how do we deal with that. Key to this, of course, is that people-to-people partnerships. So a lot more partnerships, and once the borders are open and economies can safely reopen, we're going to see a lot more movement happening along that line. Sport came into play, revitalizing the Inter-Ghana Games. Of course, you know, that's where a number of our national athletes participated in the areas of track and field, swimming, basketball, and some other sports involved in there. But part of that as well, in as much as we do sport, there's a discussion of culture and having a cultural program of exchange. So what happens when you go to the Inter-Ghana Games? You're not just for sport, but you also put together like a little Guyana night or a Suriname night or a French Guyana night where you showcase the cultures of your country. And they're looking at doing that. Of course, technological advances will all come into play during this discussion. So good news happening there. Not everything just about business and tourism, but sport is also a very important factor. And of course, we just saw the end of the 2020-2021 Tokyo Olympic Games, and currently happening is the World Under 20 Championships there. Now, President Santokhi, when he gave his remarks, he spoke about an oil and gas bauxite development initiative for both countries, and of course they talk about the upstream and downstream industries, what byproducts can come out of your oil and gas industry. He spoke about bridging the Quarantine River, and that's where he gave the timeline. Within 1 week, they will assess the study into the construction of and submissions to see if they qualify for the construction, design, build, own, operate model of that, and a final decision is expected within 4 weeks from the time that committee is put into place. Then infrastructure and transport. Of course, you know, there's a little limitation on the movement of the ferry service because of the pandemic, but President Santokhi noted that the Kanawaima ferry service is off dry dock, and a final assessment on its suitability and worthiness to traverse that course will be done within the coming days. Of course, we only had one in operation for the longest while, and because of the COVID pandemic, only citizens of Suriname and Ghana have been allowed to travel in between two countries, of course, using that discussion. And coming out of it, the final announcement coming from President Santokhi, a new Suriname-Ghana Joint Business Council has been established. This is where the discussion happened with the private sector, and today was based on a lot of private sector development, beginning with a breakfast, a working breakfast, and then of course President Santokhi referred to the opening of Optique, which is a Surinamese-based business over here operating in Guyana, and then of course a lot happening in private sector. So that's the discussion that happened within the last few days here at the Artichoke Conference Center and in Guyana as well. President Santokhi and his team departs Guyana tomorrow, having had a successful, according to both parties, successful and fruitful discussions over the past few days. Most of those bilateral discussions and the plenary session happening right here at the Artichoke Conference Center, and private sector development, private sector discussions happening at the Pegasus Hotel. So that's a wrap on exactly what happened here. Just to give you a quick reminder, 2 agreements were signed today. One in agriculture for the handling, packaging of fresh produce between the countries, of course in commercial sizes, and then one in health, looking at capacity building, treatment of patients, and then of course sharing of experiences and development, because Guyana is also looking at developing a robust healthcare system, not only in the South American bloc, but for the Caribbean region as well. So a lot of that happening here, and that's where we put a wrap on our discussion of joint press conference. Of course, you can hear a lot more of this happening, and if you've missed the discussions happening here, you can tune into the NCN News at 6. You can also find us on the Voice of Ghana, 102.5 FM. We've been streaming online, and of course, if you missed it, you can also look at the final look back of video on demand, put it that way, on social media. We're streamed at NCN Guyana and NCN News. So on behalf of the technical team, I am Leron Brummel, thanking you for joining us and saying be safe, and remember to get vaccinated.